Shrouded in mystery, cloaked in darkness, a blunt instrument of violence, turn the sharpest scalpel of shadow. Darth Maul's past is as murky as his fate. Once a tool to be used and discarded, Maul seized a second opportunity at a second life, where he would not allow himself to be manipulated any longer. Born to a lifetime of hate and pain, Maul would leave a scar on the galaxy deeper than his tormentors had thought possible.
You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Beginning and ending.
Maul, a Dathomirian Zabrak male destined to become the dreaded Sith assassin, came into the universe on Dathomir. His mother, Kaisina, belonged to the human Night Sister sect under Mother Talzin's leadership, while his father, a Zabrak, met the customary fate of being slain after Maul's conception. By birthright, Maul was a Night Brother, a group of male Zabraks who served as both warriors and slaves to the dominant Night Sisters. Just like his brethren, Maul underwent an initiation ritual shortly after his birth, submerging him in a mystical oily bath and adorning his body with intricate black and red tattoos. These markings would be replaced in the future as part of his transformation into a Sith apprentice. His original black Night Brother markings were removed, leaving him with a striking red-skinned appearance until he would later receive agonizing Sith tattoos, personally applied by Darth Sidious, not only aimed to cleanse Maul's mind, but also to symbolize his unwavering dedication to the dark side. Maul shared a blood bond with feral and savage Opress, and his mother Kaisina harbored a fervent desire for at least one of her sons to escape the influence of Mother Talzin. Less than a year after Maul's birth, she crossed paths with Darth Sidious, the youthful Sith apprentice of Darth Plagueis. She pleaded with him to rescue Maul from a life of a Night Brother, a request that initially gave Sidious pause, but ultimately swayed him, particularly due to the infant's remarkable force sensitivity. During the initial years of his life, Maul was entrusted to the care of droids, with TDD-9 being a significant caregiver, a red-eyed, spider-like droid that would be a harsh mentor, but one Maul would later see as a companion. He was raised in a secret location situated on Mustafar. A year after Maul was handed over to the Sith, Sidious received permission from his own master to train him as an apprentice. However, Plagueis explicitly instructed Sidious not to divulge their most guarded secrets to the Dathomirian. Maul's training was geared towards becoming a Sith assassin rather than a Sith Lord, akin to Plagueis and Sidious themselves. Throughout his training, Maul remained unaware of the true identity of his human mentor, referring to him only as Master Sidious, oblivious to the fact that he was being tutored by a Dark Lord of the Sith.
Forged in shadow. Young Maul's life was harsh, filled with relentless punishment for hesitations and mistakes, cruelty for any display of mercy. When TDD-9 uncovered Maul's force abilities after hurling objects at the boy, Maul would be taken off-world to train with the use of the Force on Tosta, a desolate rock world that had once been an ocean. Sidious would telekinetically hurl rocks at Maul, which Maul would have to evade and attempt to hurl them back with the Force. During his tutelage, he was warned to keep his Force abilities a secret from others. Back on Mustafar, Sidious had his apprentice chained upside down over a vat of acid into which he was being lowered, while imparting knowledge about the history of the Sith, including the Rule of Two, and the great and terrible Sith Lords of history. Maul freed himself and asked if the Sith still existed, to which Sidious responded ambiguously. He warned Maul not to underestimate the Jedi, and Maul would begin to hate the Guardians of the Republic. On another occasion on Tost, Sidious introduced Maul to lightsaber training, and he easily cut down trees with a training lightsaber. They later disguised themselves as tourists on Coruscant, observing Jedi at the temple while discussing the Jedi's eventual downfall. Maul mastered the art of lightsaber combat and Terras Cassie, wielding a red-bladed saber staff against any opponent. Despite being well-versed in Sith techniques, he was more of a Sith assassin than a full apprentice. This made him a violation of the Rule of Two, as his own master was apprenticed to another Sith Lord, Darth Plagueis, at the time. Surprisingly, Plagueis was fully aware of Maul's existence and supported Sidious's decision to train him. Plagueis's endorsement, despite the breach of the Rule of Two, stemmed from the fact that Maul was groomed to be expendable. As an assassin, he could undertake high-priority missions for the Sith without risking the exposure of either Plagueis or Sidious in case of failure. In 44 BBY, still a child between 8 and 10 years old, Maul was sent to the Orsis Academy, a special school that taught hunters, trackers, and spies. He was to train as an assassin under the orders of Sidious, who forbade him from using the Force, except for his enhanced senses, while at the academy, so as to not expose them to the public. At the academy, Sidious posed as a blind businessman, enrolling the child Maul as his future bodyguard. Director Treza, who could sense Force users, agreed to show Maul around, despite the Jedi edict forbidding the academy from training Force users, and Treza sensing the ability in the young aspirant. He quickly showed his ruthlessness and abilities by challenging the largest and strongest student in a fight on his first day. An Absian named Dalok was his first target, and the students engaged in a brutal brawl, where Maul won the encounter by biting his opponent on the nose. He would spend the next 7 years at the school learning the skills of a tracker and assassin, occasionally returning to Sidious during academic breaks to hone his Sith talents outside of the school. During these sessions, Sidious continued to brutalize the child, increasing his fear and hatred that Maul would learn to seize and turn into rage to fuel his dark energy. During one such vicious training session, a teenage Maul was ordered by Sidious to run up an icy mountain on the planet Megiddo as fast as he could. Upon completing the challenge with exceptional speed, instead of praise, Sidious simply cast his apprentice into an icy lake with the Force. Maul began to drown and call for his master's help, but Sidious simply stood and watched his apprentice struggle to survive, ignoring his pleas. Mastering his fear, Maul channeled it into hate and rage and forced himself to swim to shore, fighting frigid water, ice, and seizing limbs. Surviving the ordeal, Maul, again expecting some form of congratulation or adulation, was simply ignored by Sidious, who simply continued to walk on the shore. Over the years at the academy, Maul befriended Kilindi Mitako, a now Tolan ward of the school, who had once been an escaped slave, having killed her captor and his entire family before coming to the academy. Kilindi was another of the academy's top students, along with Maul. She would show Maul compassion, something exceedingly rare in his life, and would offer the Zabrak help and advice navigating the various challenges of the school. He would also have rivals such as Rodian's French and Hubnuts, who Maul bested in a sniping exercise. He also earned the malicious attention of one of his instructors, a Mandalorian named Melt Krakow, who had a sordid and brutal history with ties to Death Watch. His rivals and their instructors, suspecting Maul to be a Force user, attempted to kill him during a preparation exercise for the Gora, a dangerous rite of passage at the academy. Maul, however, managed to survive the ordeal and severely injuring his opponents by his Force abilities, almost exposing himself and by extension his secret Sith masters. Despite the hiccup, Maul would go on to complete his time at the academy and forge friendships with his classmates, Kilindi and Dalin. This relationship soon turned to tragedy for him, as soon after the completion of his training, the Sith Lord commanded Maul to destroy the Orsis Academy and kill everyone there, a task Maul completed even at the cost of his personal relationships. Weapon Unleashed.
37 BBY. When Maul was 17, his master had molded him into a weapon fueled by pure hatred. Despite this, Maul had a sense of honor, granting worthy opponents swift deaths. He harbored familial feelings for his master. Despite his cruel and tortured upbringing, he was utterly loyal and never considered killing Sidious, until now, during his final test. The ultimate trial arrived when Sidious abandoned Maul on a desolate world of Hypori, where he had to survive alone while being pursued by assassin droids. Weak, wounded, and famished, Maul survived the ordeal for a month before Sidious returned. However, instead of saving his apprentice, Sidious attacked the young Zabrak with his lightsaber. Maul ignited his in kind and dueled with his master. However, he quickly lost due to his weakened state. Sidious informed Maul that he was a failure, and revealed that he had already been replaced with a different apprentice. Filled with a blinding rage, Maul, exhausted and spent, made one last defiant attack, biting Sidious's hand and spitting blood in his face. Sidious spared him, explaining that Maul had passed the final test by wanting to kill him, a mandate inherent in Sith doctrine since the institution of the Rule of Two. There had been no other apprentice. Sidious proclaimed him Darth Maul, a Dark Lord of the Sith, and they relocated to a new home in the Works on Coruscant, where Maul received medical attention. Maul carried out numerous missions for his master, assassinating politicians, crime bosses, merchants, and warlords, his terrifying appearance serving as a deliberate intimidation tactic. Despite these successes, he yearned to cast down the Jedi, who he had been taught to despise for their arrogance and their weakness. Maul was a weapon, forged from spite and hate, and he relished the challenge of facing his counterparts on the battlefield to test himself against a worthy foe. He would soon get his wish. One of his earliest missions involved assassinating Siolo Urmenka, a skilled Jedi master living in seclusion on a jungle world. Maul, armed with his lightsaber, underestimated Menka, who wielded a Force-imbued wooden staff, having left his lightsaber at the Jedi Temple years ago. Menka was a renowned Jedi warrior in his prime, and had retired earlier to go into seclusion and meditate on the grand mysteries of the Force. Menka's incredible speed caught Maul off guard, leading to a brief duel. In the end, Menka disarmed Maul but spared his life. Determined to defeat Menka, Maul created 2 lightsabers that he would hold pommel to pommel to create a double-bladed effect, inspired by his Zabrak heritage and Sith schematics provided by Darth Sidious. In a rematch, Maul concealed the second blade and engaged Manka with a familiar attack. When disarmed again, he triggered the second blade, impaling Manka from behind and securing his victory. Years before the invasion of Naboo, Maul imprisoned Umboran Sly Moore in the Crone Drift as directed by Sidious. Later, Sidious posed as Moore's rescuer, drawing her to his side. Moore would later become Palpatine's senior administrative aide during his ascent to chancellorship, and became a member of the Imperial Ruling Council after the fall of the Republic. She would prove to be a cunning ally in the years to come. Around 34 BBY, Maul was sent to Charaia to secure a spice agreement with the Trade Federation. He initially succeeded, but when a merchant-led rebellion erupted, Maul reported his failure to Sidious, who punished him by force strangling him until the verge of unconsciousness and death, continuing the abusive apprenticeship. Maul was then sent by Plagius and Sidious to instigate the Ankori uprising, recruiting smuggler Vilmar Grark to facilitate the incident. When Grark hesitated, Maul used the Force to persuade him, and they manipulated the Ankori into attacking the Jedi. As the crisis unfolded, Maul urged Sidious to send him to Yinkor, seeing the Jedi become involved and relishing another chance to defeat them in combat. But Sidious insisted on using Grark instead to continue to conceal this influence in the matter. Sidious reminded him that their immediate goal was not to defeat the Jedi. Sidious would continue to make preparations for a greater plan, one that Maul had not been completely informed of, but continued to serve his master's bidding, unwittingly setting up the pieces for greater events to come.
A Blade in the Darkness. Sidious informed Maul about 2 companies, Lomite Limited and Intergalactic Ore, operating on Dorvala. These companies were important in the production of transparasteel, a vital construction material. Lieutenant Governor Wilhuff Tarkin of Iriadu and the Seswana sector, secretly aligned with Plagius and Sidious, challenged these rival companies to secure a major contract. To control Dorvala and its resources, the Sith sought to manipulate the companies into destroying each other, ultimately benefiting the Trade Federation. Maul questioned why the Neomodians of the Federation were involved in their plan. Sidious explained that, despite their flaws, they had to be part of the scheme. Sidious tasked Maul with delivering Dorvala to the Trade Federation, and the Sith's ally, Newt Gunray, the opportunity to ascend its ranks. After praising Maul's lightsaber skills, Sidious inspected his double-bladed lightsaber and inquired why he preferred it. Maul explained its advantages, and Sidious cautioned him not to reveal the Sith prematurely. He provided him with a data card containing target information. Before sending Maul to Dorvala, Sidious reminded him that the planet was different from Coruscant, and expected a successful report upon his return. At his arrival, he found its harsh living conditions, lower gravity, varied terrain, and lack of law enforcement or Jedi presence, unlike his adopted homeworld. In a cantina, Maul used a mind trick to obtain information about sabotage related to the mining companies, Lomite Limited and Intergalactic Ore. He deftly inserted himself into the feuding companies and gathered intelligence. He would plot to pit the companies against each other in open hostilities by incriminating associates of each side and interfering with the contract of pirate mercenary group known as the Tomb Clan. Maul manipulated and lured the various agents into open combat, where the miners and the security personnel would end up killing each other. He would reveal himself to finish off the survivors and alter evidence to frame the warring parties. Maul manipulated the intergalactic ore agents into receiving a message that set both mining companies against each other, leading to significant losses of ore transportation ships. Returning to Coruscant, Maul listened to Sidious's successful manipulation of Dorvala Mining's merger and Gunray's permanent position in the Trade Federation Directorate. Sidious advised Maul to study the Black Sun crime syndicate, while continuing his training in preparation for a new mission. A red dawn on a black sun.
Maul's latest mission from Sidious, following a minor excursion to exfiltrate a war criminal and arms dealer from the dreaded prison Coghive 7, and encountering the High Priestess of the Bando Gora cult, and former Jedi Padawan. Now, Maul was sent to create chaos within the Black Sun crime syndicate, by eliminating its 9 Vigos and their leader. Maul would add a new weapon to his growing arsenal, a Sith infiltrator ship named the Scimitar, a modified star courier with cloaking technology. From this mobile base of operations, he could launch his custom crescent-shaped speeder named Bloodfin after a brutish and violent hunting predator Maul had encountered on a mission in the Outer Rim. Sidious warned Maul about the Vigos' connections to the Trade Federation, but did not inform his apprentice of Black Sun's involvement in an assassination attempt on Darth Plagueis. Maul was instructed to start with Vigo Darnata, then target Vigo Morn, and finally eliminate the rest on the planet Raltier. Maul posed as a hired killer and infiltrated Darnata's hideout, deep space demolition and removal. He killed most of the people in Darnata's chamber, including his guard Sinya, and left Asa Nega alive to contact the other Vigos. Before leaving, Maul spread rumors of infighting amongst the Vigos, and had the entire space station destroyed. Hath Monchar, the Nemodian deputy viceroy of the Trade Federation, had tried to warn Darnata about the Sith's presence, but was dismissed as a doomsayer and left before Maul's arrival. Maul's mission continued as he went to Vigo Morn's homeworld of Dak. After eliminating Morn's men, he confronted Morn himself, who revealed the Vigos' rendezvous on Raltier. Arriving on Raltier, Maul deployed Dark Eye probe droids around the Black Sun Fortress and reported to Sidious. Sidious instructed him to attack and leave no survivors. Maul encountered resistance from sentries but swiftly dealt with them. Inside the fortress, he faced the Vigos' bodyguards and killed them all. He then confronted the Vigos themselves, killing each of them, leaving only Alexei Garen, the head of Black Sun known as the Underboss, to face Maul alone. Alexei had a subtle connection to the Force, and once aspired to become a Jedi, but had gone down the path of criminality. Maul defeated Miguela, Garen's Night Sister bodyguard, and confronted him. They engaged in a brief conversation, during which Maul revealed that the Sith had returned, before Garen wounded Maul in an act of petty defiance. Maul drowned Garen in a reservoir, completing his mission. He then returned to Coruscant with his injuries, reporting to Sidious that there were no survivors. Sidious scolded him for revealing the existence of the 2 Sith to Garen. Maul was then ordered to train on Mustafar. Sidious later reported Maul's success and near blunder to Darth Plagueis, who dismissed the matter as Black Sun was now in chaos, allowing the Sith to continue their plot unhindered.
A duel of devils. In 33 BBY, Maul trained with droidekas at the Lemerge building and impressed Sidious with his skills. Sidious sensed a disturbance in the Force in the Outer Rim, and tasked Maul with investigating and eliminating it, as it could threaten the Sith presence. Maul arrived on the planet marked by the disturbance and found Silas, a hulking Force-sensitive Drovian, known for dueling other Force users for personal gain. Maul confronted Silas. However, Sidious intervened and offered him a chance to become his new apprentice if he killed Maul instead. Shocked, but determined by the proposition, Maul fought Silas in a dueling ring with a nullifier field that disabled lightsabers, forcing them to rely on the Force in hand-to-hand combat. Maul initially struggled, but tapped into his rage and overpowered Silas, eventually killing him. Upon returning to Coruscant, he realized the test was orchestrated by Sidious to further his apprentice's growth and reaffirm his loyalty to his master. A blunt instrument.
Maul returned to Coruscant after receiving a new mission from Sidious. Bartok assassins had stolen a prototype hyperdrive-equipped Trade Federation Vulture droids and a hyperdrive engine, potentially implicating the Federation in their criminal activities. Sidious wanted Maul to retrieve the stolen starfighters and eliminate those responsible to avoid arousing suspicion from the Jedi. Maul followed the Bartok freighter to Raltier, where he decided to fake his capture with the help of C-3PX, his companion assassin droid. He parked the scimitar in a ravine and entered a Bartok fortress through an open window. Inside, Maul was captured and led to a courtyard where he saw the stolen Vulture droids and other Bartoks. C-3PX was also quote-unquote captured to maintain their ruse. Both were placed in separate cells for interrogation. Maul managed to break free, incapacitating an interrogator droid, and escape his cell. He encountered guards, overpowered them, and escaped through a trapdoor into an underground cave. In the cave, Maul faced various obstacles, including a chasm and pursuing spider. He eventually reached the other side and discovered a Bartok with his lightsaber and a holographic Falleen. The Bartok revealed that the hologram was a trap to lure Maul out. Enraged by the Bartok's deception, Maul defeated two of them, trapped the one with the vocabulator over a toxic pool, and administered a truth serum to extract information about their employer, Grudo the Hutt. Grudo had been hired by the Trade Federation to create a prototype hyperdrive engine but was never paid. The Hutt had planted a sensor tag on the engine, which led him to the Trincata Starship's facility where the Vulture droids were being constructed. Grudo hired the Bartoks to steal the Vultures and the hyperdrive, intending to use them to destroy the Korleg Academy for rejecting his son. However, the Jedi intercepted one of the freighters carrying half of the Vultures and the hyperdrive. Maul used thermal detonators to set a 10-minute countdown to destroy the Bartok fortress and contemplate C-3PX's fate. He discovered that the Bartoks were preparing for an attack on Korleg. Inside the freighter, Maul found information about the crystal gravefield traps and decided to fake his capture to escape. Maul then engaged the remaining Bartoks, killed them, and left the fortress on his bloodfin speeder. The fortress exploded as he departed. He encountered two more Bartoks who had survived, defeated them, and reached the scimitar. He then set off for Korleg, cloaking his ship. Maul's arrival at Korleg was timely, and he prepared for a confrontation with Grudo. Using the Vulture droids under his control, Maul threatened Grudo, who evacuated with his son to Korleg's surface. Maul allowed them to escape as per Sidious's orders, and redirected the Vulture droids to a Trade Federation base. Returning to Raltier, Maul searched for 3PX, but found only a restraining bolt, confirming the droid's escape. He returned to Coruscant to report back to Sidious.
Setting the trap. In 32 BBY, Maul sparred with training droids on Mustafar, before receiving a holographic message from Sidious. He learned that Deputy Viceroy Hath Monkar had disappeared with a sensitive Sith holocron containing Trade Federation plans for a blockade of Naboo. Maul's mission was to find Monkar and ensure he didn't reveal information about the upcoming plan. If he had already shared it, Monkar and anyone he spoke to had to die. Maul arrived on Coruscant, used his cloaked scimitar, and rode a speeder bike to a Customs Bureau outpost. He evaded a police droid and accessed a HoloNet terminal to locate Monkar. He discovered Monkar's possible involvement with Corellian information broker Lorn Pavin. Maul visited a tavern in the Crimson Corridor and learned that Monkar might meet Pavin there. He followed Pavin and his protocol droid, I-5YQ, shadowing them in the hopes of locating Monkar. Arriving at the Dewback Inn, Maul spotted his target and Pavin conversing, but refrained from attacking due to the public setting. Maul tracked Monkar to a penthouse, eliminating the guards. He interrogated him, who revealed his conversation with Pavin about the Naboo blockade before Maul killed him. He prepared to retrieve the holocron when bounty hunter Maui Lin, hired by the Trade Federation, confronted him. Maul fought her and escaped to report Monkar's death to Sidious. Sidious ordered him to kill Pavin and retrieve the holocron, spurring Maul into action. He infiltrated Monkar's apartment, unnoticed by Coruscant security, already investigating the scene of the murder. Inside, he discovered that the Sith holocron was missing, likely taken by Lorn Pavin. Maul headed to Pavin's location, intercepted a holo message from Yanth the Hutt, a Black Sun Vigo, who had not been present during Maul's earlier massacre, and learned that Pavin might be selling the holocron. Maul tracked the Vigo to his local club, the Tuscan Oasis, killed him and his bodyguards, and continued his pursuit of Pavin and his protocol droid. Following him and the droid, Maul confronted them, but he had already been secured by the Jedi Padawan Darsha Ascent and her mentor, weapons master Anun Bondera. A lightsaber duel ensued. Bondera sacrificed himself to buy time for Darsha and Pavin to escape. Maul continued tracking them through the Coruscant sewer system, where they encountered and defeated Sithons, mutated and terrible descendants of humans long banished to the Undercity. In an underground cavern they fought. They faced a Tauzen, a large worm-like creature invisible to the Force. The creature delayed Maul, allowing his quarry to attempt an escape. With Maul in hot pursuit, Darsha tried to eliminate him by blowing up a warehouse, killing herself and seemingly Pavin in the blast, hoping to kill the pursuer as well. Maul survived and reported the deaths to Sidious. He contacted Sidious and received coordinates to a space station where they would meet. Then he left Coruscant in his cloaked ship, the Scimitar, heading to the Perlemian orbital facility. There, he planned to hand over the holocron to Sidious discreetly, as the Jedi were now investigating the murders. Upon arrival, Maul floated to the facility's airlock, preparing to meet Sidious. Meanwhile, Lorn Pavin, who had survived the blast at the warehouse, followed Maul using a Tauzen nodule to hide from the Force. Pavin attempted to kill Maul but failed, losing his hand in the process, but barely escaping with the holocron, intent on giving to the authorities to reveal the upcoming Sith plan for the invasion of Naboo. Maul attempted to chase Pavin deeper into the facility, but Pavin had stumbled into a political rally being hosted for Senator Palpatine. Handing the holocron to the senator directly, in hopes that it would lead to the revelation and unraveling of the plan. Pavan, content, returned home. As he arrived at his hotel room, Maul ambushed his elusive target and killed him quickly. A reward, Maul thought, for his quarry's tenacity and sheer aptitude for survival. A trait Maul respected. And with that loose end neatly tied, Sidious was free to continue with the planned invasion of Naboo and tip the first dominoes to his and the Sith's final ascension. Thanks for flying with us. Jordan here. Just wanted to let everyone know what's happening here at the Star Lords podcast. Star Lords is now on Discord. If you would like to join the Star Lords Cantina Discord server, you can find a link in the description or on any of our social media accounts. Reach out with a DM or email. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter by searching the Star Lords podcast. Go ahead and give our page a like and send us a message. You can also email at starlordspodcast@gmail.com. Send us your fan art, Star Wars collections, or fan fictions, and you may even get a feature on one of our pages or even the show. Don't be afraid to offer corrections or add to any of the topics that we discuss on the show. We are also on Patreon, so if you want to help us pay the bills, as well as get a few awesome perks like bonus episodes, access to the private Facebook group, or the VIP section of the Discord server, head on over to patreon.com/starlores and sign up for as little as $1 a month. And finally, make sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher app or YouTube, as well as sending us a 5-star review on iTunes. This really helps us reach a wider audience. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. This is Christian.
This is Jordan.
Today we are talking about the one, the only, the man of nightmares and the man of infinite expertise, Darth Maul.
Indeed.
We're currently orbiting his home world of Dathomir, which I guess we'll just jump right into it. The whole association between Darth Maul and Dathomir was kind of a later entry. So that was kind of like a retcon that happened through the Clone Wars TV series. Originally, the Maul's origins were not well known. There was a comic book that showed a young Maul just being a red-skinned Zabrak that Sidious appears to find at some kind of slave market. Like just an orphan boy on the street. But later that was kind of retconned to make him one of the Night Brothers with associations to the Night Sisters of Dathomir, and that whole plot, which we will discuss in other episodes where we actually break that down.
And wasn't he like the first Zabrak seen? Like, wasn't the Zabrak introduced in his character?
No, there were 2 other Jedi Zabraks that also appear in episode 1. So obviously Darth Maul's introduction to the fandom happened obviously in Star Wars episode 1, but there's 2 other Jedi Zabraks, Koth, and I forget what the other one's called off the top of my
I don't remember
head.
them.
They're like minor background characters.
Well, did they even have speaking lines?
No, they had no speaking lines. Yeah, they were like way in the background.
Yeah.
So Darth Maul like appeared very unique. He was the first Zabrak that, yes, people would ever notice, let's say. But after kind of like the visual guides and stuff started coming out, people picked up on the fact that there were other Zabraks and they created this whole new species.
Yeah.
Darth Maul obviously has some very strong demonic influences in his appearance. The other Zabraks have like more of a brown skin, and they have like outlines of what look like Maul's tattoos.
Yeah.
But they're not the same, and they don't have that black and red contrast or like red eyes or anything. And they even have hair that kind of hides some of their horns, so that's why they would probably not be super.
Yeah, and there's even that Zabrak in KOTOR 2 and he's almost like blue.
Yeah.
I can't remember if.
Yeah, and
I
there's
may be
there's
wrong
like
about
more.
that, but-
There's like the yellow skinned
Yeah.
Zabraks. No, the Zabrak in KOTOR 2 is like brownish.
Is he?
Yeah. Bowdor.
I'd have to. Yeah, Bowder.
Yeah.
I have to go back and
Yeah,
look.
he's got more like a brown complexion. But
But he doesn't look demonic. Like
No, yeah, like definitely only it's the Knight brothers.
And it is funny how they make Bowder sound too. Even like his voice is very soothing.
Yeah.
You know.
It's trying to get a break away from that.
It's like it's
association.
Almost, yeah. Trying to get us to not be racist against Zabraks.
Zabraks. Even though the whole point of Darth Maul was to
Yeah.
to be evil.
Yeah.
On that point, Maul doesn't have a lot of character early on. Even kind of authoring the first half of this episode. Obviously, we're going to return to Darth Maul's tale because it's not over yet. As anyone that's seen episode 1, spoilers, it doesn't end there. But there's definitely a strong
for better or for worse.
Yeah. Well, we'll discuss that when we get there. But there's definitely a strong contrast with Darth Maul before and after episode 1. Before episode 1, he doesn't have much of a... Well, first of all, in the movie itself, he has almost no speaking lines. I think he only has like 3 lines in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Even though he's like the main antagonist, more or less, other than Sidious. But he's very much this like his name suggests, like a blunt instrument, a Maul.
Yeah.
He's just a force of nature. Doesn't talk a lot. He doesn't have a lot of character development. He's had an extremely abusive upbringing. But he's ultimately a tool. Like, he's disposable. He's meant to follow orders, which is not very like Sidious and Plagueis. Like, Plagueis allows Sidious to take him on as apprentice because he's not seen as a threat. He doesn't, in their eyes, break the rule of 2 because Maul was never meant to ascend to be anything more than a rabid attack dog.
Yeah, it's almost like Maul's more of just an animal to them.
Right, exactly.
Like, than even an actual
person. Yeah. And so like a lot of that, either inadvertently or not, like comes out in a lot of his early stories. He appears, he's a quiet assassin. He just wrecks things and then he disappears again. Yeah. And he
is kind of a one-dimensional character. There's
again,
not a whole lot to
making
him.
A strong distinction because later on he does kind of become more complex.
Yeah.
And that is an interesting character development, especially for a character like Maul. And we'll kind of talk more about that when we get into the second half, pun intended, of this of his story. But prior to that, only speaking to stuff prior to the events of the Clone Wars, Maul is, yes, very one-dimensional. He's a brute force assassin. His character doesn't really develop all that much. And he's essentially Darth Sidious's lackey, which is something that Sidious doesn't really even respect, right? He's, again, this tool to be used and then discarded. Maul is very un-Sith-like in that he doesn't pursue power for his own personal gain. He's a servant of his master, and he's always this servant. Like, he's beaten, he's cowed. He only does things to make his master happy. Really, the only instance of him fighting back against his master is when he kind of like bites his hand at his final test. Yeah. But even then, it was like a half-hearted attempt. Whereas like Sith doctrine demands that you become ambitious, you become more powerful than your master, and you're meant to overthrow your master. Yeah,
at least in the early depictions of Maul, though, he's like not ambitious at all.
No, exactly. None of his motives are his own. He just gets sent.
It does seem like his will has been so broken that he can't have ambition. Almost, you know?
Exactly. He just does what he's told.
Yeah,
and then comes back like a dog. Yeah, a trained dog.
And he's also like just so indoctrinated as well. Like, he has no exposure to like anything outside of what Sidious taught him, right?
Yeah.
Or allowed him to be
to
taught.
know.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of it, right? Like, again, going back to he was never meant to be a Sith Lord, really. Yeah. He wasn't, like, Sidious did not impart all the deep knowledge of Sith. He didn't even know he was being trained as a Sith until much later in his life. So yeah, you can tell he was never meant for anything more.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, that makes Maul a tragic character. He's like definitely beaten and abused his whole life. He has no future, no ambition of his own. Like it truthfully at the heart of it, it is more of a tragic tale.
It is also kind of interesting that there's no instance or depiction of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon trying to like redeem Maul or turn him to the light side.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Which I've always kind of wondered, because there's in a lot of Star Wars stories, like they're trying.
I mean,
to
the whole story of Darth Vader is that return to redemption.
There's that, but there's like other stories too outside of the main films is of like trying to turn Darksiders back to the light side, right? Yeah. Or whatever. But with Maul, there is just a sense of irredeemability almost.
Yeah. And I think part of that is part of that single-mindedness of his pursuit. He is a weapon.
Yeah.
He is meant to destroy and nothing else.
Yeah.
And that part of him still carries on even after his resurrection. Spoilers. He still single-mindedly hunts Obi-Wan with that same like thirst for vengeance.
Yeah.
That's part of like who he is internally. Be that something that Sidious instilled in him, or that becoming who he truly is, like at his core. But realistically, like even outside of Sidious, quote unquote, rescuing him, he really didn't have a future on Dathomir either. The Zabrak slaves are just equally disposable to the Night Sisters. He would have been a slave anyways, so he was at least given a chance at somewhat higher aspirations, being the weapon of a galaxy-wide regime rather than just a planetary-wide regime. But he's a servant and a slave nonetheless in either case.
I mean, and just a little bit of what ifs here, but wouldn't it have been kind of sweet if, like, after Vader comes to power, like, Palpatine is like, you take him. I don't need him anymore. And like Maul becomes like Vader's
apprentice.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd like that.
I think it would be crazy.
They do fight.
Do they?
In the future, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Which is cool because it's kind of cool to see echoes of the past and the quote unquote present in the form of Vader dueling. And there's a cool like character piece in that. But we'll discuss that when we get there, because it is actually a very cool comic, and I do actually quite like the revealing nature of their duel.
Is this the Disney Vader?
I can't remember who authored it. Well, like I said, we'll get there when we get there.
I have heard good things about the Disney comic book series of Vader.
Of Darth Vader.
Yeah. People have given good reviews of
Just
it.
like Rogue One, not everything Disney touched is trash.
Yeah.
It definitely is not worth the trash we get. But.
I know, what's that Wookiee in Boba Fett, Book of Boba Fett. He's introduced in that Vader series.
I forget his name, but he's like a Wookiee bounty hunter.
Yeah.
But again, like that's lifted from other Wookiee bounty hunters that we know from the pre-Disney era. So it's not even original.
Yeah.
It's just lifted and remade. Some more thoughts on Darth Maul. The actor who portrayed him, Ray Park, he's an actual martial artist, so that actually like lended itself to the staff fighting technique. Using the saber staff / double-bladed lightsaber, often interchangeable in terminology. Maul's signature weapon. Everyone lost their minds when Episode 1 came out, and he ignites that second blade. But Ray Park also kind of reprises the role, doing motion capture for Darth Maul in the Clone Wars series as well, which is pretty cool because it adds that fluid.
And he's
movement.
in Solo, right? The Solo movie.
Yes,
at the very
and he reprises the role again in live action
briefly,
at the very end of Solo. Yeah, but that kind of fighting style, I believe it was Wushu that he does. It's just very kinetic and very like energetic.
Yeah,
and that obviously lended itself to like how now Sith and Jedi fight.
Yeah, and he sort of like epitomized the differences between the OG series and the prequel series about how Lucas went for like a different lightsaber fight.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Yeah.
Like you see it in Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, but it's like mostly epitomized
in Darth Maul.
Darth Maul, yeah. It's just the acrobatic style.
Yeah, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And again, that also like speaks to Maul's character as like he's the living embodiment of a weapon. Like, his whole purpose is geared towards violence.
Yeah.
He's an assassin. He's a brute. He's like filled with rage and hate, and fear. And like Yoda says, he uses that fear. There's a few instances where, like, through his abusive training, he learns to fear Sidious. He learns to fear the life-threatening situations he gets thrown into. Yeah. But then he just fuels that into hatred and anger, and then overcomes whatever obstacle.
Yeah,
which also will lead to his survival after suffering. Some might say impossible injuries, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Are we going to get there in this episode?
Not in this episode.
Oh, okay.
In a future episode. We're coming back to Maul. Like I said, his story's not done yet. Another thing I just really wanted to touch on with Darth Maul was Darth Maul's biological family. I didn't totally like... I kind of like the characters that would come up later. And again, these characters will probably have their own episodes of Savage, Oppress, and Feral.
Oh, yeah.
And all the Night Brothers. Their names just... it's too on the nose. And Star Wars is known for its names. General Grievous and Darth Sidious. Yeah. But Savage, Oppress is just too on the nose that I just can't... Now, you can excuse it with the whole, like, Night Sisters... they're already like a slave caste, and they're like the Night Sisters would name them that way, like kind of almost demeaning names like Feral and Savage and Maul. But I don't know how I feel about Maul having like biological attachments. I kind of like the idea of him being like almost this free floating entity that's just like captured at a young age by Darth Sidious. But now Maul has a mother and biological brothers. There's the Night Brothers as an organization, but then he has like actual blood brothers who do come up again later, and who work with Maul in the future, which we'll touch on more later. But just I wanted to bring it up now since we're talking about kind of the earlier, or I guess the later retconning of Maul and his origins. Also, the name Maul being his given name rather than Darth Maul. Maul, before he was a Darth, was still just Maul.
Yeah.
Kind of goes into the whole naming convention. I'm like, it would be cooler if it was his Darth name and he could have changed it. Right?
It does seem like
Sheev Palpatine isn't just Palpatine Sidious, right? He changes his name. Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker, but once again, Darth Maul. Right? Even Count Dooku is his real name, and Darth Tyrannus is his Darth name, right? But also that speaks to Maul not having a dual identity. Maul is and has always been, again, that slave and that instrument. So they just tack Darth onto his name because that's what he always was meant to be.
I mean, even it does sort of feel like Darth is a like Sith title. And was Maul ever really like a true Sith?
So again, he's called a Sith Lord even.
Yeah, which is almost surprising to me.
Yeah, and after Pelagius is killed by Darth Sidious, Maul is technically the successor because there is no one else yet.
Now it is the rule of two again. Yeah.
So whether or not that was ever his purpose, like we said, Sidious never intended for Maul to truly inherit the mantle.
Yeah.
I guess just by default he inherits the title, but isn't really deserving of it, let's say. Is kind of how I read it. Also, surprising fact is that Darth Plagueis was still around quite far into when we meet Sidious and Maul. So Plagueis is still around,
right?
At the beginning of episode 1, way behind the scenes, right? So that's kind of like retroactively included in the conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Plagueis is one of the coolest. Like non-film characters,
right?
Yeah,
and the fact that his fingerprints are on so many things,
yeah,
like even Anakin's conception and stuff.
Yeah,
like, it is cool to have that ominous figure even in the deeper background than Sidious.
I really hope there's even maybe an animated show or.
At this point, I don't hope for anything, but
well, that's true. But it would be sweet to see maybe a young Palpatine or something.
Yeah,
with,
a young Palpatine series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would go, but you can always hope.
You can't, not anymore. There is no new hope. Darth Maul was requested episode 2 by some of our fans. So hopefully if you're still around, you asked for this a long time ago. So I hope you do listen to this. At least it whets your appetite with the beginning of his story.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say a lot of the earlier stories of Darth Maul are more visually engaging. A lot of them came through comic books.
Yeah.
Again, it's like that visual striking appearance of Darth Maul, lack of character development and lines doesn't really make for a great novel character, but he does appear a lot in comic books early on, and it lends to that visual physicality of the character. But also by that token, a lot of his early stories are very simplistic. He goes out on a mission, does his thing, comes back. He goes on a mission, does his thing, comes back. There's not a lot of deep character driven motivations.
Yeah, it almost feels like you're just playing an action adventure video game.
Right, exactly. Just go break a bunch of stuff and then come back. Yeah.
Or reading a Maul story.
Yeah. That isn't to say there aren't early Maul depictions in other media, but definitely was very strong in the comic book scene early on. Which I'm not opposed to. It's just kind of that kind of storytelling lends itself to that. And video game too.
Yeah.
There's a Maul video game. Again, that being said, that kind of lent to this episode not having that much depth. It was just kind of reading what was given. And I found also like his Wikipedia entry is also very, at least again for those earlier stages, it's very roughly written compared to other Wikipedia articles. So I just think overall his real life lack of character development exists.
It is.
Like people can't even be bothered to write his Wikipedia entries properly. So
it does, like I said, you see, as cool as he is, he does seem pretty one-dimensional.
Yeah.
He's not.
But definitely up there. He's up there for me as a character. I quite liked him in episode 1. I kind of like that force of nature type characters who just show up and wreck stuff. Like his role as like a marauder, an assassin, and all that does it for me. So I'm quite content with the character. Mixed feelings about his resurrection. We'll get to that, like I said, when we get back to it. But
I just kind of hate that kind of stuff. But it's
definitely even worse now because the trope is so overplayed.
Yeah.
And
people just can't let characters die for some reason.
They just can't let it go.
Yeah.
Remember, attachment is a pathway to the dark side. But there are some cool redeeming qualities to Darth Maul's return that don't make it all bad.
Yeah.
So that's what I will say as kind of a sneak preview till we revisit this character again.
Indeed.
But until then, that's all I got for now.
Sweet.
Any other?
No, let's get off this godforsaken planet.
Right.
Peace.